Right, we can be seated. Mr. Champagne?
Thank you, Your Honor. The people called to the stand, Jim Ezzell.
Come on up, Mr. Ezzell. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Jim Ezzell, E-Z-Z-E-L-L.
And what do you do, sir?
I'm an investigator with the PLATA County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your current rank?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. Okay. And how long have you been an investigator at the La Plata County Sheriff's Office?
I've worked for the Sheriff's Office. I began working for the Sheriff's Office in 1979, moved into investigations in 1984.
Okay. And at times you've had different roles within the investigations unit and within the Sheriff's Office. Can you just give us a brief overview of how that went?
Began my career as a jail deputy, then moved into patrol, then moved into investigations. At one point in time, I was promoted to sergeant, was moved back to the jail for the probationary period, then moved out to patrol, and then moved back into investigations.
And within the investigations unit, did you have a supervisory capacity over the entire unit in 2012?
Yes, I did. I began my supervisory capacity in 1995.
Okay. And when it came to the Dylan Redwine case and Mark Redwine case, what was your role during that time period, 2012 and onward?
I was the overall supervisor for the criminal investigations unit.
Okay. And when this case came into the criminal investigations unit, did you have a role in investigating it?
Yes, I did. I managed the personnel involved.
Did you give out the assignments on the case and specific tasks to specific investigators?
I gave out a portion of the assignments, yes.
Okay. And did you also work the case yourself as a caseworker?
Yes.
Okay. I should say as an investigator.
Yes.
What I'd like to do with you, sir, is I'd like to kind of go through some topics that have been touched upon briefly, but by other witnesses perhaps, but just get some input from you on those as well. Early on in the case, there was a search warrant conducted at the defendant's home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was conducted by the FBI?
Yes.
Was there a partnership between the FBI and the Sheriff's Office? How did that work?
Yes, there was a partnership between the FBI, the Sheriff's Office, and CBI.
And there were electronic devices that were collected from the defendant's home during that search. Is that right?
Yes.
Were any of those electronic devices the ones belonging to Dylan Redwine?
No.
Other than Mark Redwine's phone, were any of those electronic devices of significant evidentiary value in the case?
John, pardon me, Lieutenant. I'm going to object to foundation at this point. My memory of all of the folks at the house doing that search warrant is also growing stale, but I don't remember Lieutenant Ezzell being there. I have been corrected on occasion, so that may be, but I think if he's not there, then there's going to have to be some sort of other foundation, or perhaps the court can inquire as to what basis to allow this in, just not hearsay.
One, he's the supervisor. Whether or not there's significant evidentiary value would be within his knowledge. Whether he was there or not, he's going to know what was collected. I'm not finding this would be hearsay for reasons we previously discussed. I mean, it's just no evidentiary value. It's already been introduced into evidence. Is anything you're talking about not been introduced?
No, Your Honor.
So you're overruled.
Your Honor, does that mean that the scope of this is the entire investigation because he knows who?
No, not necessarily. This is what you're objecting to. This is what I'm ruling on.
Okay.
Switching gears briefly, were you involved in a large-scale search on December 8th of 2012?
Yes, I was.
And what areas did that search cover?
The search began in the area of Edgemont Ranch on Florida Road, moved north up through the Lemon Dam and Transfer Park area, and continued over to County Road 501 and up into the Vicito Lake area in the community.
And how would you describe the nature of this search? Well, how was it conducted?
It was basically a large group of personnel, both from emergency services and law enforcement, as well as community members. People were divided up into teams and progressed up the roadways along the sides, up into the areas that I described previously. And investigators were put into vehicles and maintained basically a roving patrol or contact to meet with various teams should they found anything of interest.
I showed you a map of that search. Would you recognize it?
Yes.
Exhibit 498. If I may approach? You may. You recognize that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Judge, I'm going to need to look at that. I'm confident we had a copy at one point. I'm not seeing it right.
All right, that's fine.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the areas that were searched on December 8, 2012?
Yes, it is.
Move to introduce.
Any objections?
Relevant.
It shows the extent of the investigation, which is relevant. It's admitted.
Thank you. Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing the map here to the jury, if you could just come down with the pointer and just give us a couple of geographic locations so the jury can orient themselves. Where did the search begin on the far left side of the screen?
The search began over here in the area of Edgemont Ranch and progressed up Florida Road.
Okay. And we see a spur that turns off to the left there about 2/3 of the way up Florida Road and leading up to some text up there. What area was that?
This is the Lemon Dam area and Transfer Park area.
Okay. And did the search continue on up into the Vicito area?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. You can have a seat, sir. Thank you. This map highlights essentially the roadway. Was this what we can call a roadway search or road search?
Yes.
And how far off the road in either direction did the searchers, how far were they instructed to search?
Basically, it was to follow along the sides of the road and out into the properties adjacent on either side of the road as far as they could within about 15, 20 feet or so.
Now, did Mark Redwine participate in this search?
Yes, he did.
And which area did he search in?
He searched up in the area of the Lemon Dam, right near the intersection is where I saw his team searching the intersection with the road that goes up to Lemon Dam with Florida Road.
To your knowledge, did he ever volunteer or participate in any other law enforcement searches before or after this event?
Objection. That would call for speculation and beyond what this individual witness knows.
He was in charge of the investigation. It was limited to his knowledge. You're overruled.
To your knowledge, did Mark Redwine ever participate or volunteer in any other law enforcement searches before or after this event?
He did not.
Did you ever instruct Mark Redwine that he was not permitted to join the search efforts?
I did not.
Did you ever order him to stay home on the night of November 19th and afterwards in case Dylan Redwine called into the landline?
No.
To your knowledge, did anyone else ever instruct Mark Redwine that he was not permitted to join the search efforts?
No.
To your knowledge, did anyone else ever?
That's beyond what this witness would know. He cannot know what every law enforcement official told Mr. Redwine and Mr. Redwine's other family.
I understand that if he were there, he would know what was going on at the time it happened, but I tend to agree with Mr. Moran at this point.
Okay, I can ask a different question, Judge.
Right.
Did you inquire of the law enforcement involved in this case that was under your supervision of whether they ever instructed Mark Redwine to stay home in case Dylan called in on the landline?
I did.
And did you also inquire of the law enforcement under your supervision whether Mark Redwine was instructed by anybody that he needed to stay home and not join the search efforts?
I did.
To your knowledge, did anybody ever do that?
That would be the same objection then from Mr.
Okay, I'll stop there.
That's your say.
That's fine.
I mean, we approach.
Well, he's stopping there. Do you still need to?
Please.
All right.
Thank you. And the folks we're talking about, specifically the folks under your direct supervision, right? The investigators?
Correct.
Part of your investigation, were you able to eliminate the involvement in this case of any sex offenders registered in PLATA County?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. That's going to open the door to a whole Pandora's box of information. The efforts that, well, we should approach on.
All right. Come on up. Sure. Hold on, I got to go find what the last question was. I went too far, so I got to find it. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, after talking to the attorneys, I'm ordering that you disregard Lieutenant Ezzell's answer regarding the elimination of sex offenders as suspects in this case. So you're not to consider that for any purpose, one way or the other. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Let's turn to the Middle Mountain search in 2013. During that search in Middle Mountain, there were bones that were found up on the mountainside, both animal and human bones. Why were those bones removed from the mountain instead of leaving them in place?
Two purposes, one to secure them, and the other was to determine if they were human or non-human.
And how did you go about determining if they were human or non-human?
We took the bones to anthropologist Don Mulhern.
And when you learned that the bones were in fact human, did you contact the coroner?
Yes,
Did the coroner ever come up to the area where the bones were found?
she came up into the general area, viewed the area.
Did she choose to get actively involved in the search?
No,
Did she exert any authority or rights to take possession of the remains?
no.
And what instructions, if any, did she give you in the event that you might find more remains?
Just to keep her advised.
After you found out that the remains were human, did you ever conduct an excavation at the remains site?
We did.
Which area specifically and why?
The specific area that we focused on was up near the top of the ridge where the clavicle was found and the scraps of clothing between the two deadfalls. We focused on that area because the soil in that area was very soft. There was a lot of forest dust, and it appeared that some of the articles that we had previously found were mixed in with that forest stuff.
If you give me just a moment, I'd like to put the photograph of that area up on the screen for you. Previously admitted Exhibit 331. This is the area that's been described as the area between the two downed trees. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is the area where, if you recall, just which items were found here?
Scraps of clothing, pieces of the shoe, the earbuds, and the clavicle.
Okay. And from viewing this picture, can you tell if this picture was taken before or after any excavation was done?
This photo was taken before any excavation was completed.
Okay. And this area, I believe, was identified by law enforcement as the sort of the main area where the remains were initially deposited. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So tell us about the excavation efforts that you made.
We had an archaeologist from Fort Lewis College, Mona Charles. She came down to the scene. She brought an assistant with her, brought buckets and some screens, and the surface in that area was placed into the buckets and brought to the screens, and the material from the buckets were then sifted in order to locate any further evidence.
Okay. Was there also a metal detector that was used over that area?
Yes, we also ran a metal detector through the area.
And that excavation was, did Mona Charles, did she, as the archaeologist, did she participate or supervise, or what was her role?
She participated in it and explained to us what to do.
I want to shift gears. After the remains were found and the death notification was given to Mr. Mark Redwine on June 27th, did you participate in that event?
Sorry, indeed.
I'm sorry, did you participate in the actual death notification for Mr. Redwine?
No, I did not.
Okay. But it was on the are you aware it was on the 27th of June?
Yes.
And as what's known as an advisory witness in this case, you've been able to be present here in the courtroom with the court's permission, correct?
Correct.
And you heard the testimony of Mr. Brandon Redwine, is that correct?
Yes.
And that he received a call also on the 27th from Mark Redwine just a few hours after the death notification, right?
Yes.
You heard him refer to Mr. Redwine using the phrase blunt force trauma several times in their phone call on that day, right?
Yes.
Objection to this line of questioning and just rehashing previous witnesses' testimony.
I'm assuming that he's trying to set up, hopefully, his next question.
That's accurate, Your Honor. Thank
All
you.
right, go ahead.
Did you ever mention the term blunt force trauma to Mark Redwine at any time during this investigation?
No.
Your Honor, if I may, I think that the way to handle this going forward is to ask that question and not the rehash question.
I agree.
You've heard testimony regarding the location where the skull was located. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were actually present when the skull was located, right?
Yes, I was nearby.
Did you participate in any searches between the remain site number 1, where the long bones, the leg bones, et cetera, were found, and the area between that and where the skull was found?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell us about those searches?
We searched the area leading up from the remain site 1 starting right in the area of the gravel pit, which was a little over, but basically in line with these areas. We searched up the mountainside, approximately 1,500 feet in elevation, and then up to the ridge line overlooking the site of the skull.
And during, do you recall that search being August 11th, 2018?
Yes.
If I showed you a map of that search, would you recognize it?
Yes.
People's Exhibit 515? You may. You recognize that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the area that was searched?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Any objection?
No objection.
Admitted.
Move to publish, please.
Go ahead.
Can you come down off the podium, speak into the microphone, and explain to the jury what we're looking at?
This depicts the search area from the area of the gravel pit and the recovery site 1. All of this area in here had been previously searched. We then began our search by exiting the area of the gravel pit, coming to this side of it. 3 dog teams with personnel assigned to each team moved up the slope through the forest, up to the ridge, overlooking the skull site.
And tell us about that terrain. What's the terrain like between recovery site number 1 and the top of the ridge that leads into Runla Park?
It's fairly steep in some areas, not quite as steep in others. Heavily forested, a lot of loose ground, rocks, pitfalls.
Okay. And did you ever find, well, as you were walking through there, did you find many or any animal remains in that area?
I did not observe any.
Okay. Were there animal or game trails that seemed to be running or crisscrossing through that area?
I did not see any.
And while you were searching that area, did you find any of Dylan Redwine's personal possessions, such as his backpack, iPod, hat, wallet, or phone?
No.
During your search through that area, did you find any more of Dylan's remains, such as his pelvis, rib cage, spine, or other parts of his remains?
No.
Thanks, and you can have a seat. We've heard a lot of testimony throughout the course of the trial and even seen several maps and some photographs of remain site number 1. But did you also create an aerial drone video that flies above those areas and created as an exhibit for the jury to see those areas?
I participated in that production, yes.
Okay. Can you tell us about what your role was and kind of how that rolled out?
My role in that was to be a guide to the individual doing the filming.
Okay. And did you, in fact, do that task? Were you with him the time that he was filming?
Yes.
And did you point out to him the areas of interest for filming?
Yes.
And did you identify those locations both from your personal knowledge and from GPS coordinates?
Yes.
When that video was created, did you feel that the areas that he was filming were fair and accurate to the important areas that he was trying to capture?
Yes.
And after the video was created and you've watched it, do you think it's a fair and accurate representation of the areas that he was attempting to depict and identify?
Yes.
And that the locations themselves are accurate to both Mark Redwine's home, as well as the recovery site number 1 and the location of the skull?
Yes.
I showed you, you've watched that video, I believe. At this point, we'd move to admit it.
Oh, can you give me a number?
Sorry, 362.
And have him identify 362 being what he's looked at?
Sure. That's right. Presented you with what's been marked as People's Exhibit number 362, which is a disc containing the drone video. You've watched it in its digital version, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
But I don't know that you've ever watched it specifically off of this disc, have you?
Not off of this disc, but I have watched it in digital form on my computer.
Okay. And again, is it a fair and accurate representation of the area it depicts?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Well, still thrilling surprise. I haven't watched what's on this disc either. I suspect that they've been careful with it. If it's what I believe it to be, it's been provided in discovery. I've seen a drone flying over the area. I would object based on the fact that
I'm going to grant the objection because it has what is being introduced has not been reviewed as being the same as what was testified to. Did you have another objection to it?
Well, let's start there. I'll leave it there for now.
Well, this is going to, well, it may not just be your only chance. There's going to be another chance. So, do you need a recess?
I suppose we do, Your Honor.
All right. How long is this video?
It's like 3 minutes long.
Oh, so it won't take very long then.
It won't. And if it pleases the court, one other option would be for me to play the first 10 seconds of the video for Jim Ezzell to identify it as the video that he has seen before.
Which is unfortunate. I don't want to have the jury just wait in the hallway, so we'll take a little bit longer.
Okay, Your Honor, as you please.
Send you downstairs, let you stay down there for maybe 5 minutes, and then you got to come back up. So remember my admonitions, and we'll get you back up here as soon as we can.
Right.
Thank you. You can sit it for a second. And Mr. Moran, you can put your jacket on. Since the jury's coming in a second. And are you going to have any? Do you want to deal with any other objections now, or do you want to just wait till the jury comes in? And maybe you don't have any others besides what you've already said.
The videos, it seems like, are clear. The objection is just that this drone takes a pretty narrow view of the evidence, so I think it's unduly highlighting certain evidence. So under 403, we object to this piece of evidence. We have all these maps that I think tell a better story, so we're, I think, confusing the jury with this piece of evidence.
I think the importance of this, based on what I think it's going to show, and I guess because I haven't seen it, is the ruggedness and steepness of the terrain and distances, which will show up better than maps. So I do think it's relevant. And so with that, lay the foundation, it'll be admitted.
Thank you, Judge.
And we'll have the jury come in. Everybody rise, please. Right outside. Come on in. All right, we can be seated. Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Your Honor. We were discussing this drone video that was created by you as well as some other folks are helping you. There are 3 sites identified in the drone video. What does site number 1 represent?
Site number 1 represents Mark Redwine's home.
Okay, and site number 2?
What's been described as the dump site.
And, excuse me, site number 3?
What's been described as the site of the skull.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You haven't admitted it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Move to admit and permission to publish.
You haven't laid the foundation yet.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said over the break, that I had laid the foundation. Is that the disc that you viewed out in the hallway in the past couple of minutes?
Yes, it is.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the area?
Yes.
Is that consistent with the video that you've seen based off this laptop?
Yes.
Is it in fact exactly the same video that you saw on the laptop?
Yes.
Move to admit.
All right. It'll be admitted. So, and I forgot what number it was.
362, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Permission to publish?
Yes, 362 is admitted.
All right. I'm going to stop the video at various times just to point out some landmarks for the jury. But we're beginning it now. Obviously, site number 1, as the text box reads, is that Mark Redwine's home?
Yes, it is.
And there seems to be a roadway kind of passing off to the left. What road is that?
That's County Road 500.
And obviously, this video is taken in the winter. But let's keep going. Let's stop there. This is the view above Mark Redwine's home, looking out on which area?
It's overlooking Middle Mountain in the general direction of Site 2 and Site 3.
And just to be clear, do you see any obvious trails that are snaking across this terrain?
No.
Stopped it at the 11-second mark. Well, there's 2 more indicators that have come up for the jury. Could you explain those?
Site 2, as I said a little while ago, that's been previously described as the dump site. Site 3 is the site of the skull. It's actually on the other side of the ridge.
Okay, and could you just come down and just point out that ridge line for us so we understand?
This is the ridge line up here. The skull is actually down on the other side of that ridge line.
Okay. .362. paused it at the 111 mark. Obviously, we've seen that Site 2 comes up on the screen there. Is that the terrain to the left side of that marker where it says Site number 2, where many of the remains were found, the femurs and the tibia and the shoe, et cetera?
Yes, this steep drainage.
And I stopped it at the 123 mark. We see the steep drainage on the left, and it looks like an area of clearer snow. Can you kind of show us where the trail is that comes in from the roadway?
This is Middle Mountain Road here. This portion, as you're going up the mountain, this is the northbound portion. It makes a sharp right turn here to go back towards the east. The ATV trail comes in approximately in this curve, comes down a short distance, and then travels south back towards Bear Eye Park. Where it turns and curves back to the south is where the foot trail takes off and goes along this ridge here.
There's 2 snowmobilers in that capture in that screen right now. Is that part of your team?
Yes, it is.
Was the gate open when you went up there that day to do this filming?
Yes.
Thanks. What are we seeing here?
This is coming in off of Middle Mountain Road and going back towards the site.
Now we see an orange marker placed into the image. What is that and who placed it there?
This orange marker is meant to point out the general area of the dump site.
Did you place it there?
Yes.
What do we have going on in this shot?
This is again be traveling back towards the east, going over Site 2 towards Site 3 up over the ridge.
I'm going to stop it here. Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the area between Site 2 and Site 3 when you searched it in the summer of 2018?
The general terrain is a fair and accurate representation. When we searched it, there was no snow.
Mr. Champagne, would you stop it just for the record and for, I think, for Mr. Moran? Can you give the time stamps?
Yes, Your Honor. This is at the 220 mark. Stopping at 234. We saw a cut screen, and it looks like the same image. Can you explain to the jury what was going on there?
The drone had reached the extent of its distance traveled and had to, the drone operator had to relocate to the top of the ridge here in order to.
Thank you. All right, stopping at the 239 mark. Can you explain to the jury what we're seeing here?
This is looking down to the what's been described as the skull site, Site 3 in the video, coming down off of the top of the ridge towards the skull.
We see large areas and patches of snow. Is that the area known as the meadow area?
Yes, a large meadow here and here, which extends back out towards the Middle Mountain Road.
.304, Mark, on the video, we see an orange rectangle. What is that mark indicating, and who placed it there?
This mark here in the middle of the screen, the orange mark, that's meant to identify the location where the skull was recovered. And I observed as one of my younger investigators walked into the area.
Okay, we've got a new scene or angle here at the 311 mark. What does this represent? We see some snowmobilers in the foreground. Where are they?
This is the parking area up at Runlet Park. This is Runlet Park here, and the skull site is actually down over the top of this line of snow in the tree.
So this shot is going to represent that parking area across the meadow to the skull site. Is that right?
Yes.
Again, the orange square representing the skull site.
Yes.
I want to ask you just a couple of...
What's your time?
I'm sorry, that was at the 346 mark. I'm going to go back just a couple of seconds, if I may. Mr. Ezzell, Lieutenant Ezzell, you were present when the search for the skull occurred on November 2nd and 3rd of 2015, right?
Yes.
And this last shot where the camera travels across from the parking area, across the meadow, over to where the cranium was found, is that roughly the same route that the Fosters would have traveled when they found the skull on November 1st? Is that the same area that you traveled?
Wait.
Okay.
He was present when that skull search occurred. It could be hearsay, it could not. I don't know.
That's fine. I can rephrase the question. Is that on November 2nd and 3rd, is that the same terrain that you covered with the Fosters when you were searching for the skull?
Yes, when we went up to the scene with the Fosters, they indicated the area for us on Middle Mountain Road to stop, and we walked across this meadow down to that area with them.
Now, there was a description from the Fosters that they traveled through this area and eventually out to a patch of snow, right? You recall that?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, go to that same patch of snow with the Fosters when you were up there searching?
Twice, yes.
Did you see any bear tracks in the snow that day?
No.
And did they report to you back in 2015 when they were there with you that they had seen bear tracks in the snow?
They did not.
After the skull was found on November 3rd, did you continue to search some of the area before the snow came in?
Yes, we formed two search lines, one about 100 feet down below where the skull was found, and another line about another 100 feet below that one. We searched up through the drainage, through the site of the skull find, and then out to the edge of the tree. And as we were finishing up, the snow fell.
Can Can you show the jury on this image kind of roughly where you were searching?
It would be back down in the area here beyond these trees. You can see the slope line in here. We're down on the other side of that, coming up the hill.
Okay, and you said you had two lines come up the hill, is that right?
Yes, we had one larger line of personnel and then a smaller line of personnel coming up through that range.
And when you conducted that search, did you find any of Dylan's personal items like his wallet, cell phone, hat, backpack?
No.
Did you find any other remains of Dylan Redwine in that area?
No.
And for the record, I've stopped the video at the 3:37 mark for this last line of questioning. Okay, we've got a new camera shot here starting at the 3:49 mark. What does this represent?
This represents where we found the skull, and basically be flying the drone back out of the room.
Okay, and we're heading back up to the top of that ridge that you described as the top of the run of the park?
Yes.
Okay. I'll stop very briefly and go back just a second. I'm at the 4:08 mark. On the top quarter of the screen, we see a horizontal line going across the screen. What is that?
This here.
Yes,
Is
sir.
is that what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
That's the two-track road, which takes off from the parking area on Middle Mountain Road and goes around.
Thank you. .421 mark. Please orient the jury. What are we seeing here?
This is after you go over the top of the ridge from the skull site, headed back down towards Site 2, which has been previously described as the dump site.
Thank you, Lieutenant Ezzell. And actually, as long as I've got you standing and ready to go, we're going to talk about a different video that I want to discuss with you. You said you were present when the skull was found, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you return at a later time to the same area where the skull was found in order to create a second drone video just depicting the immediate area around where the skull was found?
Yes.
And did you have a chance to review exhibit number 360 to watch that video and see what it contains?
Yes, I did.
And is it in fact the video that you filmed when you returned to the area to conduct that drone footage?
It's the one that I had filmed while in my presence.
Okay. And is exhibit number 360 a fair and accurate representation of that area?
Yes, it is.
And you viewed it and put your initials on it, is that right?
Yes.
You recognize that exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize it?
It has my initials on it, and that's the video that I placed back into that sleeve.
Okay.
Placed back into that sleeve.
And you watched the video on the disc?
Yes, I did.
And it's a fair and accurate representation of that area?
Yes.
And you've also watched the video on the laptop?
Yes.
And that's the same video that's on the disc, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, move to admit number 360.
No objection, thanks.
Admitted. Okay, move to publish. Go ahead. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I'm just going to pause it here. What are we seeing?
This is the general area where the skull was found, where the drainage came through, and with all the deadfalls surrounding that location.
Okay, and just for the record, this is the 2-second mark. And we see what looks like water in that shot as well. Can you explain what that is for the jury?
Yes, that's the drainage that's coming, that's seeping out through the ground above that location.
And although you may not have the exact location, can you show the general area where the skull was found among this deadfall?
The general area is going to be down in here.
Okay. Stop it at the 24-second mark. Is this essentially what it looked like when the skull was found on November 3rd?
Yes.
And as we watch this video, I believe you previously testified. I may be getting confused or ahead of myself. Did you see any evidence in this area of this being used as an animal den?
I did not.
Did you see any bones or human or non-human in that area on November 3rd when the skull was found?
No.
Did you see any evidence of an animal scavenging there, eating there, anything along those lines?
No.
Foundation.
I think you do need to lay a little bit of foundation.
Okay.
Experience.
Do you have experience seeing that type of observations out in the field?
Yes.
Did you see anything along those lines here?
Could you tell us what the experience is would be the next question.
And to the extent there's experience in this area, it's not been endorsed. It's expert testimony that has not been previously disclosed to counsel. We object.
I'm not seeing this really as expert testimony. I mean, but I would like to know a little bit more about the experience, not much.
That's fine, thank you. So the question that I'm trying to get at here is whether you saw any evidence of animal kills or anything like that in this area. Have you seen that type of thing when you've been out and searching and in the wilderness yourself?
Yes, I have.
Did you see any evidence to that effect in this area?
No.
Okay, we're going to continue with the video. Stop the video at the 256 mark. Are you able to see where Middle Mountain Road crosses the top edge of the run? Thank you. Thank you, sir. You can have a seat. Have you been back up to that area several times since that skull was first found, November 15th?
Yes.
Have you ever seen any evidence of an animal using that area as a den?
No.
Have you ever seen any animal or human remains found in that area?
No.
Prior to the skull being found in November of 2013, after you knew that you were going to be looking for the skull, after the Fosters had made their report, did you speak to the coroner about what steps you should take if, in fact, you found the skull during your searches?
Yes, I contacted the coroner before we headed up to the mountain, advised her that the information we had, and she advised me to go ahead and collect it and bring it down if we found it.
I'm sorry, I may have misspoken. I meant to say the skull of 2015, correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, there were several other searches that were done up in the Runlet Park area, is that right?
Yes.
And that includes July 2016, is that correct?
Yes.
And in that July 2016 search, were you a part of that search?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Did you find any remains of Dylan Redwine up there?
No.
Okay. Did you find his backpack, iPod, hat, wallet, or phone?
No.
You've already said that you did not find any of those items during the search in August 2018 between Runlet Park and the remain site number 1, correct?
Correct.
The jury has seen many maps throughout the course of this trial. Have you had the chance to view exhibits number 516 and 517?
Yes.
And do they represent a compilation of the various maps that we've seen throughout the case so far?
Yes.
I showed you number 516. Would you recognize it?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Counsel. Would you like me to grab that for you?
And 17, right?
All right. Yeah. You're viewing number 516. Is that a fair and accurate representation of the various searches that were done throughout the years of the entire region?
Yes.
And if I may approach at 517.
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the searches done in the Vallecito region over the years?
Yes.
Move to admit 516 and 517.
Your Honor, I don't know if the court's preference would be to have this done at the bench. I feel a speaking objection coming on.
All right, come on up. 516 and 517 are admitted.
Thank you. Let's publish, Your Honor.
Yes.
And while we're putting 516 up on the screen,
Your Honor, if I may, I would request a voir dire on this. I understand that the court's indicated that it will be admitted as it's being published.
I think that's appropriate based on what we talked about up here.
Thank you.
Stick with that. Go ahead.
So it would be helpful to have it out that's coming in, so we could put 516 up, please.
Judge, I'm sorry, I have to object to this procedurally. I think it's problematic for essentially the defense to be able to start asking questions about my exhibit without my chance to even direct them.
You know what, I did make a ruling up here as to what you wanted to say, and I got to thinking about cross-examination. I think I was wrong. I think Mr. Champagne's right. This is a cross-examination issue. I mean, you brought up what you wanted to bring up here at the bench, and so in terms of it being a voir dire situation, it's really not at this point. Mr. Champagne's correct. So
Thank you,
we
Your Honor.
cannot voir dire.
Okay.
Reverse that.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So we're looking at exhibit number 516 here, and I'm not going to belabor this too much. This is a pulled-out view of the entire region. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the areas denoted in color markings on here, what do those represent?
Those areas that are marked show different search areas that were searched.
And let's move on to 517, and I want to have you step down and get the pointer out. This is an area, a zoomed-in perspective of the Vallecito area. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what are the areas in red, dark red, on the left hand of the screen indicate?
This area here, through this, basically points out the what's been referred to as the dump site and the search up to the skull site.
And if I may approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to be specific and clear with the jury. This area here that's kind of in pink, what area does that encompass?
That area encompasses most of Middle Mountain Road and up through Middle Mountain up to One Park, with the notes searches that were done by vehicle, by foot, and by helicopter.
And when we look at this map, we're not trying to indicate to the jury that law enforcement has taken a footstep on every single part of this area. Is that right? Many of this area is covered with helicopter search, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. In any of those search areas, did you ever find any other remains of Dylan Redwine, such as his pelvis, rib cage, spine, or other parts of his remains?
No.
In any of those areas searched in this map and in 516, did you ever find his backpack, his iPod, his hat, his wallet, or his iPhone?
No.
Over the course of the searches up on Middle Mountain, we've already described for the jury several times the skeletal remains and the non-skeletal remains that were found. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you create a chart of those remains to assist the jury in having a better perspective of which remains were found?
Yes.
May I approach with exhibit number 361?
Yes.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of both the skeletal and non-skeletal remains that were found up on Middle Mountain?
Yes.
Move to admit number 361.
Objection under 403. This is unduly highlighting particular evidence and notably excluding important other information.
Well, on that you can cross-examine, but if that's your only objection, it is admitted.
It's published, Your Honor?
Yes.
And the jury's heard significant testimony about this. On the right side, what are we seeing here on this chart? Are those the non-skeletal remains, Dylan Redwine, that were found?
Yes.
And on the left side, the skeletal remains, is that accurate?
Yes.
At this point, the jury can take this for consideration during their deliberations. I'm not going to ask any more questions about it. Judge, we're heading into the noon hour. I can try to finish up. I probably have about 10 minutes left, 15 minutes.
Let's finish your direction.
Okay. During the course of the investigation, did you come to learn that Mr. Redwine was planning to dispose of the furniture that was in his living room?
Yes.
And what steps did you take upon learning that information?
I instructed my team to work on a search warrant to seize the furniture.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. The basis of this would be hearsay.
Well, I agree, but you need to be a little quicker on your feet. Mr. Champagne?
Your Honor, this is simply to show the investigative step of collecting that, those materials, not for the hearsay purpose or any other purpose behind it.
To inquire...
Please let me rule in your favor. Okay? I disagree with you. The way you preface this is hearsay. That's in front of the jury. It wasn't objected to. Ladies and gentlemen, that's something else I don't want you to consider that Mr. Redwine was considering getting rid of his furniture. You could have just gone with, you collected it. And if that's what you wanted, you could have gotten into it if there had been an objection to it, but there wasn't. So in the future, for the rest of your questioning, make sure that, well, we'll see what happens. Go ahead.
I don't know if it sounds like you don't want any further response on that, Judge, so I'll move on.
That's right. That's very observant, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Judge. During the course of your investigation, did you acquire Mark Redwine's work schedule and records from his employer?
Yes.
Were they accompanied by an attestation of accuracy from the custodian of the records?
Yes.
Okay, at this point, Judge, we're going to move to, well, let me bring forward Exhibit 135.
Your Honor, I'm going to have to beg your pardon. We got this 2 weeks ago now, so it's in another notebook and not in the courtroom. I think I know what it is, but...
Can you show it to me? I'd be happy to. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And are those, in fact, the work records that you received along with the attestation of accuracy from United Pipeline?
Yes.
Are they fair and accurate to the originals other than some redactions?
Correct.
Move to admit Exhibit number 135.
Mr. Moran?
Your Honor, I think it's irrelevant and also misleading based on one voir dire question, if I may.
Go ahead.
What date does it start? What date did you go back to, sir?
It starts on January 3rd, 2011.
I have some suspicion as to where this is going, but I don't think that something from 2011 fairly makes a point, so we're going to object into 403 grounds. If this is cumulative, unnecessary, misleading, why is Mr. Redwine's work schedule for a couple of years is misleading? I mean, it's not been established yet.
I don't know why this would be relevant going back to 2011. It might be relevant closer in time, but maybe I'm sure you know stuff I don't. So.
Would you like me to speak on it, Judge?
Well, if you feel it's appropriate there, if you guys want to come up, whatever you think is appropriate.
I can make a very brief record, Judge. One of the questions or issues in this case is the amount of time that Dylan Redwine and or Mark Redwine spent in the home following the fire in 2010, and these records reflect that.
Okay.
I need to check, but I don't think this goes back to the certificate of occupancy. I could be mistaken, but
Well, you can check on that. You have your own copy, but it was 2011 was sometime during the, and I don't remember what the date was either.
It's my next question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So, sorry, are we admitted then? Can I work with this?
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
So, thank you. Exhibit number 135.
Thank you. 135 is admitted.
Thank you, Judge. And before we go into those records, I want to direct your attention to exhibit number 193, which has been previously admitted in the case. This is the certificate of occupancy in the case. Do you recognize this? Do you recognize this, sir?
Yes.
What was the date on that?
April 22nd of 2011.
So, in your review of the records in exhibit number 135, were there times that Mark Redwine was regularly working outside of the state of Colorado?
Yes.
Were you able to analyze the dates and times that Mark Redwine was known to be present in Colorado based on his work records between April 22nd and November 18th? Sorry, April 22nd, 2011, November 18th, 2012.
Yes.
Did you create a chart to help summarize those work records for the jury?
Yes.
If I approached you with exhibit number 137 and showed you that chart, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Counsel, would you like to see a copy of this? Okay. I'm going to approach you.
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 137. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate summary of the work records produced from United Pipeline regarding Mark Redwine's work schedule?
Yes.
Does it reflect the times that Mark Redwine was working in the state of Colorado according to his work schedule?
Yes.
Does it also reflect your knowledge regarding the times that Dylan Redwine is known to be present in the Vallecito house in Colorado?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that information?
Yes.
Move to admit number 137, Your Honor.
Mr. Moran?
Object, may we approach?
Well, I know why you're objecting, but you guys can come up.
I may retrieve that.
I'll give it to Aaron, please.
All right, I'm going to ask you to walk through some of these records with me. And we're talking about the time period between April 22nd, 2011, when we know that the certificate of occupancy had been issued, and the date that we know Dylan Redwine was at the house on November 18th. What I'm going to ask you to do is describe to the jury, as I walk you through it, some of the dates that we know that Mark Redwine was working in the state of Colorado. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'd like to refer your attention to July 1st, 2011. Do you see that?
Yes.
And are you able to determine if Mr. Mark Redwine was working in the state of Colorado and for how long?
The schedule shows that Mark Redwine was in Colorado from July 1st through July 4th.
That total of 4 days.
Yes.
How about July 28th? Is that his next work in Colorado according to his work schedule?
Yes.
And how long did he work in Colorado at that time?
Schedule shows that he was in Colorado for July 28th and July 29th.
That's 2 days, correct?
Yes.
Turn your attention now to September 1st, 2011. Does Mark Redwine's work schedule indicate that he was working in Colorado, and for how long?
Schedule shows he was in Colorado for September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Okay.
I'm not certain what's happening. Is this just reading from a report?
He's reading from the exhibit.
The exhibit is inadmissible.
The exhibit that's already been admitted.
No. You're both wrong, okay? 137 is not admitted, which I believe he's looking at, but I can't see him because I'm...
No, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
Judge.
that's
He's looking at 135.
Is it? Okay. Well, then it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Those days that he's not working in Colorado, what other states is he working in?
He's working in California, Utah, New Mexico, Wyoming, Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana.
Instead of walking through each time he's working in Colorado and each time he's not, let me ask you a summary question. Were you able to determine how many days that occurred between April 22nd, 2011 and November 18th, 2012? How many days is that? Were you able to calculate that? And if you're not sure, I can show you some notes that may refresh your recollection.
I believe it was well over 500 days, but less than 600.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you some notes?
Yes.
How many days were
It's 577 days.
And out of those 577 days, how many days was Mark Redwine working in Colorado?
94.
Do we have that up here?
Yes.
Do we have it now so we don't forget?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you review the text messages exchanged in Exhibit 480 between Mark Redwine and Dylan Redwine?
Yes.
Did you review the work records as we've discussed relating to the specific time period between the Labor Day trip and November 18th?
Yes.
And in your understanding, based off those two records, were Dylan Redwine and Mark Redwine ever together between Labor Day and November 18th?
On Labor Day, but not after Labor Day.
Okay, so after Labor Day and before November 18th, were they ever together?
No.
Finally, as part of your work in this case, did you compile the data from the various electronic devices that have been examined in this case and presented as exhibits to the jury?
Yes.
Did you isolate that data and create a chart of all the electronics exhibits showing the time period between November 17th and November 22nd, 2012?
Yes.
Is this chart supported by the other electronic device exhibits that have already been introduced during this trial?
Yes.
Does it include data from the devices of people that Dylan was close to, such as Elaine Hall, Ryan Nava, and Amanda Saxton?
Yes.
If I may approach with exhibit number 485, please.
Yes.
I've presented you with exhibit 485. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the compilation of the various exhibits and data from electronic devices that have been introduced during this case?
Yes.
Move to admit exhibit number 485.
Mr. Moran?
Your Honor, so as I'm paging through this, I'm seeing that the first few pages, it's all taken from, well, the first 2 lines are Exhibit 6, but then the first couple pages are all Exhibit 475. Into the like 5th page, and then we've got Exhibit 31 for 1, 2, 3. And these exhibits have already been admitted, so make that record just to support a cumulative objection. I think this is unnecessary in the objection.
Well, that record also supports a summary, so it's admitted as a summary.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was asking you, this compilation of data, this chart, includes data from people that Dylan was close with, right?
Yes.
Do we see Dylan regularly communicating with those people on the 17th and 18th of November?
Yes.
After the 9:37 p.m. text on the night of November 18th, does Dylan Redwine ever reach out or communicate with any of those family or friends ever again?
No.
There's other people who are important to Dylan, but that are not in this document, including Corey Redwine, Kristen Baird, and Adam Harvey, Joe Ceballos. Is there any evidence that Dylan Redwine ever reached out to any of them ever again after the night of November 18th?
No.
Is there any evidence that Dylan reached out or contacted anyone after the night of November 18th?
Asked and answered.
That's a different question. Go ahead.
No.
November 18th, the last night we know Dylan to be alive?
Yes.
Is Mark Redwine the last person Dylan Redwine was ever seen alive with?
Objection, foundation, there's evidence to the contrary.
Well, there may be, but you can present it. Go ahead.
To your knowledge, is Mark Redwine the last person ever seen with Dylan Redwine while he was alive?
Mark Redwine is the last person known to have been seen with Dylan Redwine when he was alive.
No further questions.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, time for our lunch recess. Please remember my admonitions, which I can't seem to find. I had to pull them out so I could read them to you. Don't talk to anybody about the case. Don't let anybody else talk to you about it, and don't talk with anybody involved in the case other than court personnel. We'll start up again at 1:30. So everybody rise with your. We'll be in recess.
Okay.